Next time I see you have that game.
Many years ago, many years ago, it went like this. Go, 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 man. Big priest. Go, 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 man. Now this for your father. The open door. That's what I'm only care about making progress. You recognize people. That is big progress. And now, how far do we go? Yeah, Phil. Good place.
The last 31 years.
Delegate.
Yeah, with kind of.
Whenever I'm doing that, Don't tell me.
Told you.
One second. Yeah,
That's all. That's. This one is. It is. This is still.
Mom.
Research. It doesn't keep on.
I want you to see that. I don't know this one. It's watching. Everyone say hi. Critical. Is it me? No, you still see this. Don't touch me. Yeah, go stand in front. No, yeah, you can. This is the camera phone. It's the Zoom. It's the Zoom. It's not. This is the wrong. Come here.
One second. When I walk up from there,
No people. I need to turn off the light. I need to turn off the light immediately. No, no, I was turning off the music. I'll enable it. You have to save it already. I'll give it on you. I don't want I'm sorry, this is my, I think this is my content. I think that's my content.
This house, son.
The outside. No, I think I have to keep it. You know what to talk? Tell me when it's good.
Let that down.
Down?
Oh, yeah. Up.
I have to put these ones down. Tell me when
Very
it's
good.
I got it.
Make sure it's tied up. No, put that one back.
They're sharp as thing. But they're not.
Put that one. That one needs to be- looks pretty sure.
Actually, sure. I see what. No.
What, is it live?
Yeah. Ari, we.
Show there. Show there. What's the Wi-Fi password? She needs it. She needs it. Mika needs it. Mika Sofer needs it. She's right here. Give it to Mika. What? She just said in public. In public means what? Museum, Jason.
Don't advertise. Stand in line.
I know.
Ari, that's insane.
Correct.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you all for being here. Family, friends, those who travel near and far. Mark, the Yartzeit, my brother. Hear me back there? Loud and clear? You're good? VA plus. Thumbs up? There you go. Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here this evening to mark the 31st Yartzeit of my brother, our brother, cousin, nephew, friend, HaKadosh, HaTamim, Aaron Yosef, Ben Hanani Sinai David, Ari Halberstam. May it be a Melis Yosher for us all, and usher in Simchas for the entire family.
Amen.
As Lubavitch Chassidim, we all know that the weekly Torah portion instructs our daily life. This week, Parshas Pekudei, we mark the completion of the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary that traveled with Klal Yisrael into the wilderness. The Torah recounts in painstaking detail the exact accounting of the gold, the silver, and all the materials used in the construction of the Mishkan. emphasizing the importance of transparency and integrity in all sacred matters. But more than that, Parshas Pekudei teaches us a deeper lesson about the eternal impact of our contributions to Hashem's world. A message that particularly resonates tonight on the occasion of Ari Yartzeit. At the end of the Parsha, after all the effort, donations, and detail that we go into, we read, Vayechal Moshe es ha-melacha, Vayechas ha'onen es ha'oel moed, V'chaved Hashem malei es ha-mishkan. Moshe completed the work, cloud, then went over the tent of meeting, the oil moed, and then the Mishkan was filled with Hashem Shekhinah. This moment represents a transformation of human effort into divine presence. The Mishkan was built with physical materials. However, once completed, it became a vessel for eternity. This reflects a fundamental Jewish truth. Our actions here in this world do not disappear. They create something eternal, everlasting. Ari's life, while tragically cut short, was filled with meaning. His Jewish pride and Jewish identity, his connection to Torah and mitzvahs did not end with his passing. Like the Mishkan, they continue on. They continue to radiate divine here in this world and continue to shed path to continue to light up the path for us all here. I'd like to call up Ari's nephews and namesakes, Ari and Yosef, Ari's nephews, plural, and namesakes, Ari and Yosef Yehuda Akoyin Gutnick, and Ari's nephew and namesake, Ari Apfelbaum. Please join me here at the podium to read the Rebbe's Kapitel, as well as Ari's Kapitel.
Welcome to Celsius, and I assure you, Shemayim. He told them how to name getting ship called, but the getting new, the nail he knew, I should have knew. And the other than they knew, Peter up to one of us. I was something when I'm shooting, I'm going to shaman. I goes, me.
It's not high ten, but y'all on the certain one, that I'd say, see the big course, if we'll make it allow. Shifts over the film of the house ground or someone on the top of there, after them, because they're labeling him, and the guy, we got in almost.
Thank you, Arik. Thank you, Ari. Your uncle would be very, very proud of you. I'd like to take a moment just to thank the Jewish Children's Museum staff, in particular Shalom Ber Baumgarten. Thank you very much for helping coordinate this evening, as well. Honorable mentions, family and friends, Rabbi Michael Miller. Thank you for being here. cousin Shia Hecht. Thank you, representing the Hecht family of the NCFJE, as well as an honorable mention to Mika and Yossi Sofer. Thank you for continuing to honor Ari's legacy on behalf of the family. Thank you. And thank you very much. In addition, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge those who couldn't make it this evening. I'd like to acknowledge my sister, Sarah Gutnick, as well as my brother, Ari Halberstam, who are both joining over Zoom. Now, I'd like to please pull up to continue on with the Siyam in Kaddish, Ari's cousin, teacher and program director to Menachem, please join us.
Hey, he's not gonna steal the show, right? Hi, everyone. I'm gonna make a siyum on Safed Marcus, of Ari, Al and Hashem becomes Ami, and we are going to say a little bit of Dvar Torah and see how important it is and connected to our times today, especially in Ari's Yartzeit and in general with the Jewish people. So, Masechta Makos is actually a Masechta which the Rebbe made a Haduna, and the Rebbe spoke about the fact that Masechta Makos is a Masechta that naturally is connected with Galus, naturally is connected with pain, with sorrow, as it is actually named, lashes. It discusses the subjects of those that are lashed, those that are penalized, and throughout the Masechta there are many, many discussions regarding that matter. For example, a very interesting point that is mentioned in the Masechta is regarding Ari Miklat. In a case where someone, a Yid, kills another Yid, the Shogeg, without any kavana, so he goes to Ari Miklat. And there's 3 Ari Miklat in Eretz Yisrael and 3 Be'ever HaYarden. So the Gemara asks, the Be'ever HaYarden class, the Eretz Yisrael class, if you want to give everyone the opportunity to be able to access the Ir Miklat, the city where the Ritzeach Bishgaga will be able to escape to, you will give them easy access from wherever they are. And it seems to be that there isn't an equal dividing between the locations where Yidden are living. There's 3 cities in the entire Eretz Yisrael, and another 3 Be'ever HaYarden. After in the country that is called Eretz HaGilad, where the Shevet Menashe, the Reuven, Shevet Menashe settled across the Jordan River. Before they entered Eretz Yisrael, 3 cities in such a small area. Asks the Gemara, why are you giving such a small population 3 cities while the entire land of Israel gets only 3 cities? And the answer that the Gemara brings is the Gilad Shchichei Ratzin. In the country of Gilad, there's many murders. And the Gemara brings a pasuk that says, Dichsiv Gilad Kiryas Pe'ali Oven Akuba Midam. This pasuk mentions the word Akuba, and the Gemara asks, my Akuba? Midam. Amar Rebbe Elazar, Elazar says, Shahayu Oikvin La'arei Nefashis, that they would hunt, that they would hide and hunt to kill. And therefore, in that area, because there is many, many Ratzchem, so there are more Ari Miklat. The Gemara asks, why is there a difference of location also inside Eretz Yisrael? You have 3 Ari Miklat that are very close to each other. So the Gemara responds that the same situation is in the city of Shechem. Also in Shechem, says the Gemara, there's many murders. And the Gemara brings a pasuk from Hosea, which says, "Ukechaki ish gedudim chever koyanim derech yiratzchu Shechema." The Gemara compares between the murderers that gather together to do evil, and the kohanim, the righteous priests that gather together to give the sacrifices and the libations. So we see that when there's powers of evil, when there's forces of evil, there are, on the other hand, forces of good, forces of light. When on one side there are murderers that are gathering together to do evil and to hurt, on the other side there are groups of kohanim, of righteous people that are gathering together to do good. And the Gemara ends and concludes with a very special story. The Gemara concludes with the story of 4 great sages that were traveling, that were walking in Eretz Yisrael. And they saw Eretz Yisrael and its destruction. And during that scenery, they were crying. But Rabbi Akiva was laughing. And in that situation, Rabbi Akiva asked them, why are you crying? And they told him, how do you want us not to cry? We see our Beis HaMikdash, which was supposed to be pure, which was supposed to be clean, and we see now all the Goyim raiding the entire place. We see the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, a place where a stranger is not allowed to enter. We see now a fox walking through. How do you want us not to cry? And Rabbi Akiva responded to them. When they asked him, why are you laughing? Why are you rejoicing? He responded, how do you not want me to celebrate? How do you not want me to smile? When I see that the negative nevuos, the negative promises about what will happen to the Jewish people occurred, I am confident that the good and positive promises, that the nevuos about the redemption, the nevuos about the Geula, will for sure occur as well. And by that, the Masechta Makkos, which speaks about a situation of sorrow, a situation of negativity, of galus, concludes with a very big promise for Geula, concludes with a very big promise for happiness and for redemption. So we will say the seal, and right before that, we will just mention that we see in this Masechta, from these 2 parts of the Masechta, from the beginning of the Masechta, closer to the middle of the Masechta, and from the end of the Masechta, the connection with Ari, Hashem Yikam Dameh, and the connection to our times. When we see at the beginning of the Masechta that it describes that when there's forces of evil that are gathering together, when there's a gathering of forces of evil, and on the other hand, there's a gathering of kohanim, of priests, there's a gathering of tzaddikim. Ari was gathering on that day to bring light. Ari was gathering on that day with other Yidden, with other Chassidim, for the good, while others were gathering for evil. And we see that when these 2 gatherings are set one in front of other, the positivity wins. As the Masechta concludes with the happiness of Rabbi Akiva, with the celebration of Rabbi Akiva, that at the end of the day, the Jewish people will prevail. At the end of the day, the Jewish people will win. When we see that there's a fox walking in the Holy of Holies, when we see there is murders and all evil powers that are going through our towns, going through Jewish homes, and we understand that at the end of the day, if the negative nevuos were actually accomplished, we know, says Rabbi Akiva, that the positive nevuos will be real again also. We know that Mashiach will come and the positivity will win, the happiness will win, and today we will be able to celebrate the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi in Yerushalayim HaKadosh with the coming of Mashiach now. So,
yeah, because she's your sister, she really cares about you. That's why. Why does she care about you?
What? No, why does she keep doing this?
Why does she keep doing it? Because that's funny.
Yeah,
Like why were you picking at her? Why were you trying to bully her? Learning what? Yeah. God, I don't know. Yeah, just take it easy with it. Just make one more. So,
In the days when everything was in paper, I didn't have issues with why. Take a safer along with that. There's the Gemara Shuk Pamachas Yoilim the Yerushalayim came and she grew lahar atzeif and Korbi Dam came and she grew lahar Abayis Road Shul she yotzim beis Kochi Akadoshim Yischilu hein boichim v'Rabbi Akiva Metzachi Amrullah mipnei matam Metzachi Kamerlai mipnei matam boichim Amrullah mokim shekosu boi v'Hazor HaKorev Yomes v'Achshav Shulim hilchu boi Loi nivke Amar Lohem lekachani Metzachi d'chsiv v'Oida li'edim ne'emoni Mesuri Yo'akoyin v'Zechario ben Yevorchayu Imayin Uriya etzel Zechario Uriya b'mikdash. Uriya b'mikdash. Rishon is Zechariah b'mikdash sheni alatal ha'chotav nebuasi shel Zechariah b'nebuasi shel Uriya b'Uriya ksiv lachin b'glalchem tzion tzadeh decharish b'Zechariah ksiv oy deish v'skenis b'rechavis Yerushalayim. Actually, in Iskayim nebuasi shel Uriya, the negative nebuah, Yisim b'Yisrael shel Iskayim nebuasi shel Zechariah. Achshav, now, in Iskayim nebuasi shel Uriya, when we see the negative nebuah coming to life, we are promised that the positive nevuah will actually happen. Akiva, the sages responded to him, Akiva, you gave us comfort. Akiva, you gave us comfort. Dronalach Masechta Makis V'Adroch Alon. Da'atonalach Masechta Makis V'Da'atoch Alon. Loinis Nesheminach Masechta Makis Loinis Sish Nesheminon. Loi Ba'amodim Loi Ba'amud Osi. Dronalach Masechta Makis V'Adroch Alon. Da'atonalach Masechta Makis V'Da'atoch Alon. Lois Nesheminach Masechta Makis Lois Sish Nesheminon. Loi Ba'amodim Loi Ba'amud Osi. Dronalach Masechta Makis V'Adronalach. Dronalach Masechta Makis V'Da'atoch Alon. Loinis Nesheminach Masechta Makis Lois Sish Nesheminon. Loi Ba'amodim Loi Ba'amud Osi. Rosh Mufana Kadin Elaine will have seen stage. Rosh Homun, sing by the Mazet, who say Monu, the Elam Abo, Hanina Papa, Rami Papa, Natma Papa, Papa, Abo Mori Papa, Raf Papa, Rosh Papa, Surka Papa, Other Papa, Dor Papa. Arab Nadin Elaine was the big Rosh Befinu. But yes, Amha basis of Niana with Tetsoin, Amha basis roll. 1 year, the Ishmael of Lemdis Rosh Ishmael. Ey havaite me oy vaite khakmeni mit tsaykha ki loylom hili bi samim khokha man lo yeve loylom ne yashkh ko dakha ki vam ki sami bor khata din elom din ko amen salavoy me de manakh la farna qadin elino santa khokenim yejo be samel ro santa khokenim yejo ikrani shon mashkim de himashkim ana mashkim de dibre taylo me mashkim de dorim be taylo man meilin me meilin ana meilin kabin sa kharbin meilin de ina kabin sa ana rotin de hin rotin On rotzim chayel ma borim rotzim lebeir shachas shneimar atelim tegin lebeir shachas anshi damim mirmol lo yachtu yemem v'ani eftach bach rotzim v'nachadin eli hay kishim shazartani l'sayim masechta makis kein tazrein bi haschil masechtes v'sfarim achirun l'sayim l'mudul lamedish ma'lasis l'kayim schol dibri tam tiras achad avo schol schol atanoim v'amirim tam dichachamim yamid bi l'zari shal yomush atera mit Pium Pisarim Pinu, mit Pisareinu, Pisarazanenu at Oilon. Sky in Bonovi, Salah, Hotanka, Isach, Bishop Hotit, Bishop Hotishmir, Olecha, Hakitse, he says, Tichacha. Ki be here, we are not using Roshni time, Oilach, Yam Bino, Bismillah, Shabbat, I know Oilach, Medite, I know Wari, Sami Bashalan. Adal Yiskada Shmei Rabba. Bob, what you are saying, I'm not talking, say, we ask my poor country, we call it Mashiach. Yes, and we make them a kind of Israel, Bagel with Mankari, so me. Yes, we are on Barak Lolam, no, I got a fish about these service, Ramavis, Nasavis, a Dorvis, a Levis, a Los, with the Kucho Brujo. The Ale, and cover Castle Shiraz, to Casamina Camasada, and Alma Romain. Al Israel, the Bonon, Galtamidan, Galcosamidas, and Dan, Galcomodas in the Iraisa. Den with the Colasarva, Sariel, and Open Slamara, and the Christ of Rakan, kind of written. Join a difficult Carmen Kadamas in the Vishmael domain. Yea, Slamaravin, Shmaivakan, Tamal, and Valkal Israel in domain. Ace, Shalom in Remo, we ask a Shamalin of Valkal Israel, we do Amen. Just one word. I have to thank my aunt for getting me to finish on my sector so quickly. You should open the school.
Tonight, thank you for the beautiful Siyam. May you and your family be benched. The earth is young, Shalom Tavis, only good things from here on out. Happiness, health, all success, and all the good things that life has to offer. Continue on with the program this evening. I'd like everyone to enjoying this wonderful meal and enjoying your family and friends that you're seated next to, and we'll continue on with the soup. So take a momentary pause. Thank you. The Gorillaz. Julian was right next door. Literally next door. Beautiful. His mother was a Nora. He was personally Rani out of hospital in Netanya, right? To lead their urology. Yeah, connected this. Oh, Halberstam. Halberstam built money on the hospital. The Jewish flow. You have to go to the microphone.
City.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Gee, I might as well sit
Morning.
Same thing, but different.
Mine's a little bit. Now really is what's with mine. Good in this.
Everything is bigger. It's like it's meant for like young, like you can get anything on the you can buy it. It's worth like $400. Almost like wasn't around. Then you can hear two songs. Like I told everyone like come like 6:30. Yeah. Told them like come 6:30. But high profile. Made us wait for an hour.
Yeah.
That's true. How many bucks?
Anyway, so that one. And
That's
was actually very complimentary. So with the organization, you wanted to be the keeper that is that well. Mostly like.
Hope everyone is enjoying their soup. Carry on with the program. We like to say here, we're with the program. Before I do that, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge my mother's partner, co-founder of the Children's Museum, Ari Halberstam. Thank you. Our next speaker is a real superstar. Anyone attended or watched the Kiddush HaShluchim this year, I am sure that you did not miss the spotlight. He is Ari's cousin, Shliach to Baltimore, Maryland. Like to ask, the Yaakov Yehuda Leib Kaplan, please come up and join us. The last time someone called you by your full name.
Otasi Amimasker Hayoim. I have to acknowledge that this is the first time that I have made it to a Yartzeit gathering in Ari. And I'm happy that I'm here. Happy that I'm here. I'm sorry that it took 30 years.
That far. So the 2 hours, it takes you to get how many years?
4 hours, 4 hours.
Oh, well, sorry.
So I'm sorry that it took 31 years, but I'm here now. And one of the things that I have found to be very, very powerful for people in my community is coming to the Oil, coming to Crown Heights. People are blown away, both by the kedusha of the Oil and the vibrancy of the community in Crown Heights. And on one of our most recent trips, I was very privileged and lucky to be able to call my aunt, Ari, and ask if she would speak to this group. So we met upstairs in the JCF, and what struck me is, I don't know if I ever heard you speaking about your memories of the incident with Ari, like formally, as opposed to a snippet here, a snippet there. And it struck me how Ari lived this experience so deeply that when she was describing it, she can tell you the smells that she remembered. She can tell you the noises she heard. She can remember what the sky looked like. Every detail was vivid to her as though it happened yesterday. It's alive for her. This might be the 31st Yartzeit for the Ari, and I'm sure for our siblings, it's something which lives with them in a much, much, much more real way. And needless to say, everyone in the group said that it was one of the very favorite highlights of the trip. They all said they would not mess with you. But while you have those memories, and while that for you is a very real and living thing, for myself and for anyone who's about my age or younger, which I'm looking now, I think is actually the majority of the room, Ari does not have that place in my mind. Ari is someone who I never met. Ari might have met me, I don't know. Could be as a little baby, I was in Crown Heights, and maybe he threw me up and almost drowned me. But I never met Ari. And for most people, that's the case. And as time goes on, there are less people that know a person and more people that don't know that person. And so when you asked me to talk tonight, and I was thinking what I should share, I had a sense of imposter syndrome. It's what am I going to talk about Ari Yartzeit? I have no idea who Ari is. I never met him. And there are people here who I'm sure knew him very well. But as I was continuing to think, I realized that I think the perspective that I'm going to try to share tonight is a very important perspective, because to me, this is the perspective going forward. It'll never be your perspective. But for people like me, don't have Ari as an experience, it's going to be Ari in this way. For each person may be a little different, but I think the general gist is true nonetheless. When a person has an experience, it's impossible to convey that to somebody else. An experience is only true for the person that experiences it, which is why it says in Masechet Sukkah, whoever didn't see the joy of Simchas Beis Hashoeva in the Beis Hamikdash never saw Simcha. Why couldn't someone describe it? There were so many people that lived and experienced that incredible and tremendous joy. Nobody could share that. And let's say there was a video. Couldn't that convey it? The answer is no. Because experiential occurrences can only be experienced. You need to be there to know it. You need to be there and see it to believe it. I can share it with you. You watch a video of your wedding. Your wedding was a very, very happy day. You watch a video of it, it's not as happy. It might be fun, you might laugh at some of the things you see, but it doesn't have the same feeling. And so someone who didn't see can't know. But then there's another ability, which is not an experience. There's another way that we connect to things. And what we connect to is ideas, the concepts. Those are things we can understand because we have a mind that has the ability to conceptualize. And so people who don't experience something can still create for themselves an experience that is adjacent to what someone else experienced in real life. It might not be the same thing, but for them it's very real. And I realized as I was thinking about Ari that I did have not an experience of Ari, but I had a conceptualization of Ari. Ari was very real in my life. I grew up hearing about Ari, and I saw Ari all around, thanks to you. We had a picture of Ari on one of the bookshelves. And in a little bit, I'll share the thoughts that I had about him, the perception that I had of him, and the imagination, which I'm sure was not an imagination, what and who Ari was. But to talk about this idea of a conceptualization, I was very nervous, by the way, Shia, when you started talking about the parsha. I was saying, this guy's going right to where I was going to share something, and that's it. And then you went somewhere. A few parshas ago, Parsha Truma Tetzaveh, we go into great detail about all of the construction, the materials, how to go about constructing the Mishkan. Now, not only is it odd that we go into so much seemingly insignificant details, but if you take the Torah in general, the general rule is the Torah is always shorthand. It speaks very, very briefly. It says a few words for a lot of things, like Shabbos. Shabbos is 55 words in the Torah. And yet, there's a Masechta, the second largest Masechta in the whole Shas is on Shabbos. It's 157 folio pages. And on that, you have an entire Chelik of Shulchan Aruch exclusively committed to the laws of Shabbos. And then you have thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of pages of Shabbos and Shuvas and other things that talk about, again, Shabbos. 55 words. And here we have a huge portion of this parsha dedicated to what kind of nuts, bolts, and screws are going to be used to put together the Mishkan. It seems like it's completely out of character. And so There's many different explanations. One explanation for why it goes into so much detail is because, as we know, when it says "V'yasuvi mikdash v'shachanti b'seichel," we should build a mikdash, a sanctuary, and I will dwell in them. Does not say in it; it says in them. Chassidus explains, and them means inside of every single person, and every person's neshama. And so, how do we develop a home within our neshama for Hashem? That is through, quote unquote, the details of the building of the Mishkan. If you Torah mitzvah, that's what the curtains and the beams and all the different parts of the Mishkan represent as Torah mitzvahs. And so, it's going into detail to emphasize how important Torah mitzvahs is for our avodah, to creating a Mishkan within ourselves. That's a wonderful answer. That's why it goes into so much detail. The problem is that again, by Yaakov B'Kudei, it repeats it again. Word for word, practically verbatim, with one difference. That in the earlier parashas it says, this is what you should do. It's Hashem commanding. And then Yaakov B'Kudei, it says, this is what was done. So imagine if someone is told to set the Shabbos table and says exactly how you should do it, where the fork goes, and where the spoon goes, and the napkin, and how it goes, and how it's folded, and this plate, and that plate, and if you have a lot of cups. And then after it says, and then you did, and it goes through all those details again. Just say you did how you're supposed to. Why does it say it again? And in this is a very profound lesson that the Rebbe teaches us. And the lesson is that the human condition is a very challenging one. And what makes the human condition so challenging is that we have a very annoying thing called a brain. And a brain makes us different than animals, and a brain makes us different than plants. Why is a brain so annoying? Because a brain teaches us, it allows us to know how something is supposed to be, and it allows us to see how it isn't so. We're able to see the deficit that exists all around us because we have a mind. We have the ability to comprehend and to think. And because of that, the entire human condition is trying to find bombs and solutions to ailments and problems that we have. If we didn't know that something that we had was a problem, we wouldn't try to fix it. But we have a brain, so we know it. So the parsha is telling us these two times to let us know. You know, it is important to know what the ideal is. If you don't have a target, if you don't know what you're living for, if you don't know what you're aiming for, then you're blowing in the wind. And what's your purpose? How do you know which way you're supposed to go? If I told you to come drive to Baltimore, you've never driven, you have no sense of directions, you don't have GPS, and you don't have a map, where are you going to start? You'll drive in circles. You have to have the ideal. You have to have the target, the place where you need to get to. But we live in a world, the condition is that oftentimes the ideal is not met. It's very difficult. Life is a challenge. And so as much as we try to reach that ideal, we come up short, but we keep trying. But if you don't have that ideal, then where do you stop? What are you doing? Where are you going to go? You're paralyzed. So the Torah says it's important to make sure you have the ideal. Know what it is you're supposed to do. Sure, the end of it is they did what they were supposed to do. We all have that koyach. But the first thing is you have to have the ideal. And so this is coming back to Ari. The conceptualization that I have of Ari growing up was really a bacher that was klilas hamayos. He, from how I remember hearing about him, had it all. He was a handsome boy. He had a smile to a million miles that a lot of the Halberstams had. He was smart. He was charismatic. He was personable, friendly. He was invested in his Yiddishkeit, his Chassidishkeit. He had a special connection and relationship to the Rebbe and to the Rebbetzin. He was a very special person with a special neshama. And I idealized that. To me, Ari was a very, very special person. He was an ideal. So much so that whenever I had the opportunity, it would come up. It would come up sometimes in camp, it would come up in yeshiva, it would come up by Fabrengen, it would come up by the Yartzeit. People always made a mention. Wherever, all the years of my life, Ari always came up. I would jump at the opportunity to say Ari was my cousin. I was proud of him. Because to me, Ari was a special, special person. And to be associated with him was special. I went to Morristown later. And, leave it up to the buffer. We figured out how to make Hertz pay us for the rentals. Never actually took the money, but on the slip, it would show that we had a negative balance. And we found reasons to come into New York, like every night. Even if it was longer, I would make a point to take the Brooklyn Bridge. If I had passengers, as we were getting up to the ramp, I'd say, guys, look over there, look over there. Ari Halberstam Memorial Ramp. Because I was proud of him. I was proud that he was my cousin. When we passed by the JCM, am I wrong? I feel like the I in the JCM is Ari's I. Not okay. That's a myth. But the JCM coming by, Ari, that's my cousin. It was a pride because Ari was an ideal. Ari was someone to look up to, someone who was a bacher that was an incredible role model, a person who you can look to and be inspired to try and aspire to what he was. And if you don't have the ideal, then you don't know where you're going. And so it's true, I don't have Ari as an experience. Nor does anyone else who's younger than me. I don't know what you remember, but I can't imagine it's a whole lot. But while I don't have Ari as an experience, I have Ari as a conceptualization. I have Ari as an ideal. And I think that that is an approach for the younger generation to keep Ari in our hearts, in our minds, is to use him as an inspiration for what it means to be a Chassidish bacher, what it means to be a good person, what it means to be utilizing the talents and the abilities that you have. And ultimately, if Ari is an inspiration for us to strive higher, to strive for an ideal that might be a little bit more ambitious than the ideal we have set for ourselves before, then that is the schus for Ari. The fact that somebody did another mitzvah, the fact that someone reached a little higher, that's a schus for Ari. It's difficult for me to do something for Ari because I know Ari did that. But when I try and be a little bit better, I say, he's my cousin, I can do that too, it's my blood. That is a schus for Ari's neshama. And so I say l'chaim to my fellow youngins in the family that Ari should, and take time, by the way, I had times, different periods when I did kind of a deep dive into different things, and one of those deep dives was Ari, and I was reading all the articles and watching all the interviews, and there's a lot to hear and to learn, and l'chaim, that we should be able to learn enough about him that we can utilize Ari's memory as an ideal that can inspire us to achieve our greatest potential. To do that, it will certainly be a schus, Ari's neshama.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Yak. Wow. I'm often left speechless. That was really remarkable, and I think it really encapsulated who Ari was and what he represents and represented. Now I'd like to call somebody up who needs no introduction. Someone who has dedicated their life to Ari and Ari's legacy. First thing that they think about when they open their eyes in the morning, and the last thing they think about when they close their eyes before bed. My mother, who lives and breathes Ari and everything that she does. Someone who we're very proud of, the matriarch of the family. I could call you up. Please share a few words.
Introducing the next speaker. But I have to comment on everybody. So first, I want to thank everybody for being here. And Elias, so you walk in. Thank you for coming. Yeah, that part told me before, but I didn't pick it up. And so thank you for that. So, first of all, this goes to the Museum Tirachimil. There's a reason why the calendar didn't work this year, Shalom Bar Yerachimil. There's a reason why. There was a mistake on the calendar, Dr. Shalom Bay. When you put it in the box, you should put it in the right box. So we know that the Chav Gimel is the 23rd and not the 16th. Are you here? I saw you walk in. Am I right, David Shalom? So we all made the mistake and rented the upstairs to somebody. We usually do it upstairs. But there's a reason why it went.
It's nice.
There's a reason why it's downstairs, because I had to see that this floor has to get redone. So it's in the next project, and you know, we're doing it. It's not going to the front and around the thing, it's going, I told you. And for the dinner, it has to be painted, John. There's nothing, so, okay, having said that, I can't help you. That's a sign, but everybody, thank you for coming. So if you heard me say this before, if you talk to you, I just want to say, it's follows. So Rivki knows, and I always speak to my sister Rivki, because she's the matriarch of my family now. Doesn't want me to say it, but I have to. She's my older sister, so I call her like I used to call my mother and father, and I always run things by it. So I said, every year it comes, I have to face that I have to do Ari's Yartzeit, I go crazy. So I wait till the last minute, and I have to put things together for it. And then I start making all the calls and who's going to do what. I'm sorry, I know. If you did an amazing job. So, because of that, I heard my sister Rivki actually send this to me. And of course, it says you're supposed to say things in the name of the person. And so there are people in this room, namely the women who know the Chami Greisman, who died at 39 years old, and she had a 10th child in childbirth. And her son, who was that child, spoke at a recent Yartzeit. And I heard his speech. And one of the things he said right in the beginning of his speech, guys, that when you do the Yartzeit, if you want to come up and say it, you should. Sure. I should say. So, so he said that when you appear to hard for me to say because I'm remembering how he said it, he's very broken. So we'll come back to it. So today I went to the IO, and while I'm at the IO, me and Abba Refson talk all the time, and you all know Abba Revson runs the whole life. And just for everybody's information, it was Abba who actually was all Abba's idea, and he's the one who built and put together everything that's in the island. And we always spend a long time talking about who shows up there, who comes, and we know that Huckabee was just there today, and he actually went to Ari. Somebody told him it was Ari's Yartzeit, and he went over to him and heard the story. But besides Senator Huckabee, besides him, there are many people. And of course, we all know that the mayor goes there all the time, and the mayor always comes, we're discussing all of it. And then he said to me, we're talking just about Ari. He goes, you know the story of the Beis Yosef? And I don't remember the story because I remember nothing I learned from whatever happened after Ari died. It's like my mind is a blank. And then he starts telling me, you know the story that the Beis Yosef came and he said that he wanted to go up Kiddush Hashem. And he said that's what he wanted to do in his life. And he came, was it to Rabbi Akiva? Was it to Rabbi Akiva? Was it to Rabbi Akiva? Why doesn't everybody know? Beis Yosef wrote the Shulchan Aruch. And because he did something that he did, Michael helped me, because you should know this very well. The Beis Yosef wanted to go al Kiddush Hashem because it was the highest thing that he could do. And because he committed one small mistake, he lost the ability to go al Kiddush Hashem. And his punishment was that he wrote the Shulchan Aruch. So I think it was Rabbi Akiva who said, imagine what means to go al Kiddush Hashem. If his punishment was to write the Shulchan Aruch that we all live for forever and never and never and never live by, and imagine the person who goes al Kiddush Hashem. So last week, and I know Zali Heber, you didn't tell Shia the thing, you did tell it. So I'm going to tell it to you. So last week, I get a call from Zali Heber, who used to go on the sun every Friday with Ari. And he used to go, he calls me up last week and he says to me, you know, the very, what do you call it? I was called for jury duty. Okay. He said he leaves me this long-winded message. I was called for jury duty and they go through all the people and he was picked. He was one of the people who were picked. And he said he was picked, and then they call you up if you're picked, and the judge and the prosecutor and the defense attorneys all question you. And it was a murder trial. And they're asking him on the murder trial, they're asking him all kinds of questions. The first question they always ask you, were you ever a victim of violence? Was anybody in your family victims? Do you know friends who were victims of it? Were you ever affected by it? And the day he was called was Chai Adar. That was last Tuesday. And this year, the kvias is exactly the kvias of how Ari was shot. He was shot on Tuesday, and he died today. He died Motzei Shabbos at 9:37 in the evening. And the reason why I say it is because on Tuesday was when he was called up and chosen for jury duty. And the judge is asking him questions about, he says, look outside your window, because it was a Brooklyn courtroom. Am I right? If I say I'm wrong, you can stand up and say. And he says, you see the Brooklyn Bridge, because it's right outside your courtroom. He said, that's where my friend was shot. And then it wasn't enough. They asked him questions. And they asked him what happened. And he had to repeat it and repeat it. And it was on Chai Adar. Think about it. It could have been last week. It could have been the day before. It could have been 2 days before. It could have been next week. That day, the day of the Chai Adar, the day Ari was shot, was the day he had to announce it to a room full of people. And the reason I bring up Rivki, I was blaming on Rivki. So I'm telling it to Rivki, she goes, because there had to be hachraza that day, Milmaila, that Ari Halberstam was Mekadosh, and that he died on Kiddush Hashem. And he was shot because he was a Jew, and he was murdered because he was a Jew. And that was, to me, was such an eye-opener when I realized, was I always do, we all do, people like us. And when I say people like me, I mean people like me. I just took mothers of hostages they came to visit me in the museum and they sat with me all day and I, many challenges and many different people I've met like myself. We're both, and we're always doing battle with the Eibishter, back and forth, and they ask you, and how do you deal, and yet, that day, every week, every time it comes around the yard site, something happens to me. That Ari sending me a message telling me, Ma, I am present. Ma, I am here, Ma. I'm telling you right now, maybe you don't see me right in front of you, so maybe we're at the lower level of the museum, but I'm telling you right now, I'm above the fourth floor, I'm telling you right now. I'm way outside there in the sky and way above the Lamaila. But I'm watching every single thing that you're doing. So that was a lesson for me this week that I wanted to pass on to you. I don't want anybody sitting here. Most of the people in this room come every single year and time again. I could have 1,000 people here if I wanted. I can have 200 people. I'm not showing off by how many people I can get together. This is not a dinner. This is for us, for whoever's in this room, flesh and blood. My blood, Ari's blood is running through your veins. Don't think for one single minute that it's a headache for you to have to come out and who wants to have to get dressed and go out again. Just like I can't stand that I have to do it every single year. Ari's my son. But when I think of the life he didn't have, and I think of what he done, I'll give it to every single one of us. He didn't do it. There were 15 children on that bed, and every single one of them sergeants. And just like they wanted each and every one of us. And it was Ari that stood up and said, take me. Please, 31 years. But 31 years is like you said. Yeah, 31 years like yesterday. Yeah. I remember the crunch of ice under my feet. Of course, I remember the skirts and the clothes I wore through in the garbage. I remember every single thing. I remember everything. I remember Ari's legs sticking out from the house. And I remember also how he listened to music till the very end, and he only wanted to listen to music of Ani Mamin Mashiach. That's what Ari would want to listen to. And those were on his earphones that he put before he left this world. Not easy to live, even knowing no normal parent would say, here, I'm going to give up my child just to die al Kiddush Hashem. And today, look how many we have, every one of them today. But still, I just want to tell you, please, you're invited every year. That you're here, it's because, and that's the story going back to what I wanted to tell you about what Nechami Greisman's son was saying. So he told a story about somebody who, in Lubavitch in Crown Heights, who used to make every single year a Shemini Atzeres if I bring it in a sukkah. And he used to invite a lot of people. When he died, the children said, you know what, our father made it if I bring it in the sukkah. But just because he made it, he died, we don't have to carry on the Sefer Brings. And they pierced the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, but Shemini Atzeres is in a come on Sukkot. The Neshama is waiting here for all of you to get together. He's waiting. And that's the way I feel every single year. My thoughts, my sister said when she told it to me, that's it. There's no second thoughts about it. Ari was waiting all day today. I was telling Abba Refson, I go, he sits with the crown on his head, next to Kisei HaKavod, and all those people that are Kedoshim are standing next to the Eibishter around him. It's their day. And he's waiting for all of us, the family and friends, to come together. And he's listening to every single word that we're saying here tonight. He's watching while we're eating, if the caterer did a good job, and all the rest of it. But it's true, because he can't enjoy that anymore. It's not funny. But really, but the meaning, and you know what I'm talking about, the fact that each and every one of you are there, please do not think it's meaningless. I watch you all come. I know you all have families and you have homes and you have a house to take care of. But that you're here, you made Ari's night tonight. I'm telling you right now. You made his night. It's not about me. None of this is about me. It's you made Ari's night. And he deserves it because he gave his life up so we can all have our life in this world to continue. So first of all, we say Yasher Koach to all of you for coming here. And that if Mashiach doesn't come next year, forever after, you should all continue coming. And we should gather together. We should gather together to talk about him and for the life that he led and for the life that he gave him. And when you talked about, you didn't know Ari, but he never went to sleep ever at night unless he said his shiurim, never. And I spoke in South Africa. There are kids who started to do it because they heard that he never went to sleep. He was late for school every day. That's true. But that's one of the reasons why, because he never went to sleep. But Ari was heaven and earth. That was who my Ari was. He was literally heaven's what the Abishter. That's why God took him so early, because he completed his job in this world. And the people asked me, was he heaven and earth? He knew. He saw him every day. Okay, there are people in this room that saw Ari every single day of the week. He was handsome. Yes, he was smart. Yes, he was with the program. And he knew how to play basketball. He knew how to play ball. But he was a deeply Chassidish boy, very deeply Chassidish boy. He never wore designer shirts. He wouldn't let you look in the back of his shirt what shirt he was wearing. He didn't care how many pants he has. Don't talk to me about those things. But to throw a ball, nobody threw a ball like Ari Halberstam threw a ball. So that's why I said he was heaven and earth. And he went and saw him. I was talking this week how we used to go and saw him every single Friday. And that's why I talked about you. I told the story many, many times over. Actually, the ones I told it to are my people in law enforcement that were Jewish. I called them up all before Shabbos because it was his yahrzeit to tell them the Jewish police officers or chiefs, wow, they just were blown away from that. The story about court. That was like of all the days, wow. I go, you got to pass it on. Tell the other chiefs who are Jewish that are in the police department. Anyway, enough said from me. Said Yasher Koach to you. Now I'm going to introduce you the next speaker. So we're living in times that I don't know. You just heard it from Hanoch. And we're all being tested as we are, and it looks really, really bad. We're living in den of wolves. And they want to kill us from our side. Not different than they did in the Holocaust. Not different than they did to us than they did to us in Babi Yar. Not different than Tat V'Tat and in all those places. And it went on and on and on in every generation. Where could we run? I was speaking to my grandchild on Shabbos was died. Ari, we were discussing the continents in the world. And where the Jews had to run, there's nowhere to run anymore because every country in the world was another country that we were running away from where they wanted to kill us. So there was no place to run. We're still living, the Rebbe used to say America is still a great country. And thank God we still have a check and balance here. But even in this country, the fact that Ari was murdered in an act of terrorism was not simple. It wasn't just words. And I remember even Lubavitchers would go, big deal. And not only Lubavitchers, even people who represented organizations would vote. They put him in jail for 141 years. What's the difference? If it was terrorism or if it wasn't terrorism, it's all the same. It isn't all the same. I wrote the laws on terrorism in the state of New York, and I worked for 6 years on getting it to be called a terrorist attack. To date, the Ari Halberstam, aside from the fact that many, many, many bad people are put away in the laws that I wrote. One 18 years, one 10 years, one 12 years, all of them. A lot of them. And in fact, one story, which is probably the most significant and proud story that I have to say is I was sent to Colorado as a keynote speaker in Colorado by the FBI. They literally made a convention just for me. And I came there and I lectured them for 3.5 hours straight. You can hear a pin drop in the room, only on terrorism. And about 2, 3 years passed, and I get an email from an agent. Now, it's interesting, because everybody knows the FBI, the most arrogant agency in the world. They're not your cops in the street. They think they know it all. They think they're smarter than everybody, just the way they are. It's their attitude. And yet, this agent writes me an email, and I saved it. I'll never throw that email out. And she said, Ari Halberstam, every single member of law enforcement today is thinking about you. It's not only with the FBI in that, all members of law enforcement showed up. It was in Puebla, Colorado, wherever it was, the convention. She said, because we just thwarted, that means there was a terrorist attack that was going to happen. And based on everything I taught them in that class, they were able to catch them before. And in my mind, I don't want to say it's my proudest moment. Of course, it was an attack on Jews, because I only think in my mind, how many people did we save? Did I save by what I taught them? Not about anything else. Who knows if whoever it was that was trying to plan that attack would have been successful. So on that note, when we talk about terrorism, they're just not words. There are real people, and there are heroes in this country, and there are Jewish heroes in this country, and there are women that are heroines that are unbelievable, who do this day and night. And one of those people are with us tonight. And because we're living in a world where things are so bad because of Eretz Yisrael, and it's not just about Hamas. Who is Hamas? I have here literally pages and pages and pages of the resume of this woman who's called Judith Parsky. But I know Judith Parsky going back. She went to United Nations School. She speaks Arabic. She is a walking textbook and a genius to boot. Literally a genius. You are not going to find, I even say she could put everybody to shame, the FBI, the police department, all of that. She is not just an academic, but she was one of the people that took my hand and she walked us through together with the FBI and the police department, mostly the FBI, when Ari's case was reclassified as terrorism, when it was first treated as road rage. But in the world we're living in today, it's so important that differentiation of that market difference. And here's some words from her where she spoke. She has spoken all over the world. She just came back from Israel. She speaks at not only convention, she speaks before law enforcement in all countries of the world. She's written not only papers, documents, booklets on every terrorist organization, what their handprints are, what their footprints are. She knows it all. I mean, she is Queen Esther. She's a heroine of the Jewish people. And that you are, Judith Barsky. I'm not just saying that, you just are. And she is one of the most, I'm very humbled to be introducing you, because you are, wow, one of a kind. So with that, why don't you come up and tell us a little piece of what you know.
First of all, I feel very humbled and to be speaking here this evening, because I'm not a member of the family, and I didn't know Ari personally. He was a friend of mine, and not someone that I knew. But I do feel that somehow, because I spoke to members of the family and spoke, of course, having a very long relationship with Devera and family, I feel as if I know him just a little bit. And maybe, even if I'm not a friend, and even though I'm not a relative, because we're Jews and we're all responsible for one another, I can speak as a Jewish sister and someone who tried to bring justice for Ari and for his family. So in looking at Ari's case, and I think I'd like to look at it from the perspective of what happened at that time and what's going on now. And the reason for that is because at this point, when we look back 31 years, it's just unbelievable to look back 31 years and to see certain things that were going on at that time and that are still going on now, but even worse, that the fact that at that time, people did not want to admit that the terror attack that took Ari's life was in fact terrorism. And that today we have in the streets of New York, people distributing Hamas literature and universities as well, calling for an intifada in the United States, calling for the destruction of the United States, that all of the rhetoric that we would see back in 1994 has come to the shores of the United States. And not only that, but we have young Americans who are chanting exactly the same type of ideology, which is the kind of thing where when people talk about October 7th, and people have asked me many times, could you have seen October 7th? On the one hand, you could see certain things. You could see certain things going on in a smaller way in 2021. You could see the kinds of activities that became much bigger now. But the ferocity of it, the hatred, the extreme hatred of it is on an exponential scale. So back in 1994, and I went back to take a look at the report that I wrote in order to help to bring justice to Ari. At that time, we're trying to explain why it was important to do more than simply put the perpetrator, Yamaf Shano, in jail. And I remember at the time there were people from the FBI and people from law enforcement who kept saying, why do you need this? He's in jail. You don't need anything else. Just, what do you need this for? Why is it important? And we kept saying to them, because this is something that happened now, but if we don't learn from it, we will have other instances like this in the future. We need to learn why this happened. We need to learn the fact that this individual, well, today we would say he was radicalized. At that time, we didn't have that terminology. So it was very difficult to get that across to people in law enforcement. It was very difficult to get that across to politicians. And it was very difficult. I was also very pained, and I still am pained to say that even people in the Jewish community also had very, very great difficulty in understanding why we needed to do more, why something more had to be done, why it had to be classified as a terrorist incident. So going back to the report, and it's just unbelievable to read this now. The release of this review and assessment comes at a time when Jewish communities in the United States and throughout the world are experiencing a marked increase in attacks against Jewish institutions as well as individuals as a result of tensions in the Middle East. These incidents appear to be inspired by recent fatwas, Islamic religious rulings, calling for holy war or jihad against Jews by the leaders of Islamic extremist movements. And it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed since then, and it's even more so now. It's even more intense now because of the internet. And so therefore, when we're looking at this from the standpoint of 31 years ago, you can see a parallel between what went on then and the things that are going on today. So just to give you a flavor of that time, after the massacre in Hebron, and this was an issue that was brought up many times when I spoke to people in law enforcement. They seem to believe that because Baruch Goldstein did something in Hebron a few weeks earlier, that it was inevitable that Rashid Bazi of Shano had to do something here. And that's not true. So I ended up having, in some cases, sort of like an ethical conversation with them about freedom of choice, that each human being has freedom of choice. You can do good, you could do bad, you can go and buy a gun and you can decide to kill someone, or you can decide that maybe you'll just protest or something, or you'll write an op-ed, but not to murder someone. And there was this very great difficulty in getting this across because of the notion of the so-called cycle of violence, that somehow it was inevitable this had to happen. And part of it was an unusual situation because it ended up being not only explaining the background of the case and the background of the perpetrator and the background of extremist indoctrination, but also this idea of Bechira Choshi, that we each have independent thought and independence of action. We could choose to do good or evil. So in looking at the situation, we tried to bring to the attention of law enforcement the atmosphere that occurred right before the terrorist attack that took Ari from us. So on the day of the massacre, Abu Muhammad Mustafa, the Hamas movement's official representative in Damascus, issued a statement declaring that the military wing of his organization, the Izzuddin al-Qassam battalions, will avenge the Hebron massacre. And a separate statement from the al-Qassam battalion announced, very soon Israel will be in mourning and put up black flags because the Izzuddin al-Qassam will strike harder than ever against the Zionist terrorists, harder than they can imagine. So there were a number of different statements coming from various terrorist organizations, chiefly among them, of course, Hamas, but as well, you had statements coming from the Palestinian Authority, you had statements coming from Egyptian extremist movements, and there was this incredible atmosphere of incitement against Jews. And unsurprisingly, in that environment, there were attacks in other parts of the world, as well as the murder of Ari by the terrorists here. So the atmosphere itself was an atmosphere calling for the murder of Jews, and you had Al-Qaeda calling for the murder of Jews. You had Iran calling for the murder of Jews. It was pretty much across the board. There was not a single terrorist organization that did not have an opinion about Hebron and to say that Jews need to be killed as a result of that. And it's not because they didn't call for the murder of Jews prior to that. They certainly did. But this was yet one more excuse to say what they normally say. And then in addition to that, we had other organizations. We had the far left organizations, the Marxist organizations, the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine and the Democratic Front for Liberation of Palestine. And in reading this over again, it struck me exactly the same organizations that carried out October 7th are the same organizations that called for the murder of Jews after Hebron in 1994 and called for all of their followers throughout the world to kill Jews. And in one particular instance, one of the Muslim Brotherhood leaders called for kill Jews wherever you find them, which essentially is all over the world. So in trying to explain to members of law enforcement, why we needed to do something more than simply be happy with having the perpetrator in jail, we needed to give the context of why this individual carried out the attack. Who was he? What was he? What was the Middle Eastern context of who he was and why he did it? And why do they need to learn something from it? So this is a more complicated case than most of them. Of course, in the 30 years that followed 1994, we've heard of individuals who became radicalized and converted to extremist Islam many, many, many times over. But what was very strange about this particular case is that Rashid Baz Yamaf Shamo his father was Druze and his mother was Palestinian. And when he grew up, he considered himself to be a Druze. But when he came to the United States, he started to call himself a Muslim. So this was something that was very confusing to people who were investigating the case. They thought that maybe he's a Muslim, but his father was very secular. But the truth of the matter was, if you knew anything about, and this is, again, it was very much in the weeds, that Druze do not have a mosque. Druze do not go to mosque. So when he would talk about going to mosque, that meant he had converted, that he had converted to Islam and was was associating with and spending time with people from the Palestinian community here in Brooklyn. So we needed to explain that and explain the background and explain the fact that he converted to an extremist form of Islam, and also investigate the mosque that he was attending, which was an extremist mosque that had been raising funds for Hamas when it was still when it was not under investigation. There was an investigation to by the FBI to stop funding for Hamas, but it had not yet come to trial. It was for many, many years prior to year 9/11. And so the investigations were still going on, and there were some public events where mosques in the United States were actually funding Hamas. They had a nonprofit organization called the Holy Land Foundation, and they were raising funds to send to Hamas abroad using the American system of nonprofit organizations in order to do so. So until 9/11, that was going on. And of course, from 1994, that was still going on. And so the Rashid Baz was attending one of those mosques here in Brooklyn. And that is the same mosque where he heard a sermon and going to his motivation, calling for the murder of Jews, saying that the mask has been pulled off the Jews, and this is a time to go and do something. So his motivation was his extremism. But in addition to that, after the incident in after what happened in Hebron, he went to hear the sermon in the mosque and felt that sermon was his permission to go and carry out the attack that murdered Ari. So this whole background was something that was very unfamiliar to people in law enforcement at the time. It was a very strange thing for them. And when reviewing the transcript from the trial and interviewing the prosecutor, they came up with a phrase that the perpetrator believed himself to be a quote unquote an Arab soldier crusader, because they didn't have the vocabulary that we now use to refer to Islamic extremists. Who usually refer to themselves, they either refer to them as a jihadist, or they refer to themselves usually as a mujahid, one who carries out jihad. So they didn't have that vocabulary in 1994, but they picked up on the what he had told his psychiatrist. There was transcripts of an interview with his psychiatrist, as well as testimony during the trial. And the psychiatrist stated during the trial that, in fact, he believed himself to be a so-called Arab soldier crusader against the Jews, and that the line between Israel and Jews was blurred for him. In other words, that as we very well know, if you look at the so-called literature of Islamic extremist movements, they do not make any differentiation between Jews and Israel. They refer to Israel as Jews. And so therefore, someone who is indoctrinated in that ideology refers to Jews, and meaning Israel and Jews in America. So therefore, in explaining this to law enforcement, this again was a very foreign idea, a very foreign concept, and trying to get that across to them was something that was very challenging. So in addition to that, it wasn't a direct statement taking responsibility for the attack. There was a statement that praised the attack by Hamas. So in 1994, in this country, there were reports in this country that there were Hamas operating in the United States. In later years, we heard about that. In later years, there were investigations about that. But in 1994, after the terrorist attack that murdered Ari, Hamas came out with a statement praising the attack and praising Rashid Baz and Shema. So 10 days after the Brooklyn Bridge shooting, the Hamas movement in Gaza released a communique praising Rashid Baz's attack on the van. With great pride, the movement embraced his act and bestowed upon him the title of Mujahid, holy warrior, and Ibn Islam, that he's a son of Islam, which is, in other words, that he is representing Islam, that he is the best representative of Islam. So therefore, it's very high praise for the murderer, the terrorist murderer. And therefore, he serves as a role model for them by calling him that. We will retain the cry of condemnation on your heads, and our hand is backed by millions of Muslim hands that are ready to carry out their execution role against the Jews. Again, this is part of praising the attack. The communique continued, only Islam is a legitimate and exclusive representative of our people and its predicament. And a living proof of this is namely the holy warrior and Lebanese immigrant Rashid Anbaz, the son of Islam, who took action against the souls of the evil dregs of the Jews in Brooklyn, in America. This deed proclaims that we, the Jews, do not have the ability to tear Palestine away from our hearts. May a curse be upon your heads. So this is, again, something that was very unfamiliar to law enforcement and very unfamiliar to most people. So we're trying to get this across to them, how to explain all of this background, and as well, the fact that Hamas felt that this was a great victory for them. Even though Rashid was not directly a member of Hamas, they didn't have direct contact with him, although later, many years later, the people that he was involved with were caught raising funds for Hamas and were prosecuted, but there was not a direct connection. So the best that could be said is that they praised the attack, and they were very happy that it occurred. And in addition to that, they wanted to make him out to be someone who should be an example for all of their followers, and you could see that from their statement. So in looking at all of this, and especially in the light of October 7th, we can see a number of different parallels. And some of it is a parallel regarding how people reacted to that at that time and how people are reacting to things now. And there's this very difficult situation that we have is that, there, to some extent, we would like to believe that there is truth and that people would accept the truth. You have background information and you're trying to explain the culture and the extremism of the movement, the violence and extremist movements that were involved in this attack, praising what happened and the ideology that was involved. We like to believe that people believe that this is the truth, that they understand that this is the truth. Very difficult. It was very difficult. I used to go downtown to the FBI on numerous occasions. I presented my report to them. But then I would go down and talk to them. We'd have meetings after. We had a number of different meetings after that. So there were so many meetings that my late mother said to me at one point. I came back, at like 7 o'clock at night or something, and she said to me, "You're the only person I know who keeps going downtown to talk to law enforcement who was arrested." And it just seemed like this never-ending. It wasn't never-ending, but this almost never-ending effort to try to get across how to explain this to them. And one of the things was that they did not understand that Jewish people, and today it's even more, it's more difficult and much more different, that Jewish people who are identifiably Jewish, when you walk in the street, people know who you are, and if you're an anti-Semite, then you're a target. So there was one point where I sat with them and I said to them, "You're the FBI, you don't wear uniforms, but the NYPD, they do wear uniforms. And on certain occasions, some people attack people from the NYPD because they're wearing uniforms. But you can understand that, right? You can understand that the people from the Maoist community, they wear a uniform. They go out and they wear a uniform. Everybody knows that they're Jewish when they go out in the street." And the light began to go on and began to understand that, in fact, there's a difference between what happened on the Brooklyn Bridge, and it wasn't road rage, that it was something different, that it was anti-Semitism, that it was as well, that it was terrorism, there was an ideology behind it, there were perpetrators behind it, a perpetrator and accomplices and other perpetrators behind it, as well as an extremist ideology behind it. And the point of this was, and still is, to teach people, to help them understand that we are all facing this together. The Jewish community faced it first, and Ari, our Ari, is the one who faced it first in 1994. And that we would want more people to understand this so that it should never happen again. That it should never happen to any other person's children, should never happen to any other person's community. And that this was the gift that Torah would like to give to the community, the Jewish community at large, but to a larger community, to everyone, that this should never happen again. So in trying to bring justice to Ari, this is not just an idea of helping the Jewish community and bringing justice to Ari, this is also trying to prevent other people from being murdered. So in looking at this, you've already said earlier that Ari's Neshama is with us this evening. And when I said earlier that I speak as a sister, when Yosef's 10 brothers came before him in Mitzrayim, they said, Achim anachnu, we are brothers. So I am Ari's sister. But the point here is that we are brothers and sisters, and we need to carry on the memory of Ari, and need to carry on all of his good deeds and all of the things that he, all the positive things that he accomplished in his life. But the legacy of Ari, the additional legacy of Ari, is to try to prevent terrorist attacks from happening against other Jewish children and other Jewish people, as well as other people. And it's not something that Ari wanted, but it's something that happened to him. And so it's part of his legacy. It happened to be part of his legacy, but it's the legacy of a kadosh. And that's something that we need to remember. So when Yosef's brothers stand before him and they say, Achim anachnu, they also say, Achim anachnu b'nei ish echad. We are brothers, the children of one man. And that means that we need to be unified in order to continue the legacy of Ari and to continue to fight against discourse and terrorism. And lastly, I listened to Deborah many years, and I always hear her, the month of Adar is such a torture for her. It's so difficult for her. On the one hand, the month of Adar is the month of Purim, and Deborah told me that Ari so loved Purim. But on the other hand, Adar is a month where we remember Amalek. And what happened to Ari is a manifestation of Amalek. And for those of us who experienced it, that was a manifestation of Amalek in our lifetime. Of course, October 7th is an even larger manifestation of Amalek in our lifetime. So I'd like to share with you some words from Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch with regard to Amalek, which I found very heartening and very inspirational, but also something to take to heart. So Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch speaks about Amalek, and he says that Amalek is not what we think it is. Amalek is not a particular people, that Amalek is a glorification of violence. The glorification of violence, we are still familiar with it, but we don't realize it. All of the video that we've seen of hostages being paraded on a stage with Hamas, Yimach Shamam, holding guns and having a pageant there and humiliating our brothers and sisters in front of them, that is a glorification of violence. And every terrorist attack, all the praises, all of the laudatory remarks, including the one that I just related to you from 1994, that's a glorification of violence. And Rav Hirsch says, Zecher Amalek is to remember that violence, the glorification of violence is what's wrong with our world, is what is broken with our world. He says, the threatens the moral future of mankind is not Amalek, but Zecher Amalek, the glorification of the memory of Amalek. As long as the annals of humanity attach glory to the heroes of the sword, as long as those that throttle and murder the happiness of mankind are not buried in oblivion, subsequent generations will look with admiration upon these infamous strongmen, and their memory will awaken the desire to emulate them in acts of violence and glory. In other words, as long as Hamas, as long as this glorification of violence continues to exist, and in fact, in Hebrew, Hamas means violence. In Arabic, Hamas is the acronym of Harakat al-Muqawat al-Islamiyah, which is the Islamic resistance movement of Palestine. But the acronym Hamas in Hebrew means violence. So here we have Rav Hirsch explaining that as long as this continues to exist, that is not supposed to be the pinnacle of civilization and the pinnacle of our world. Only when God's moral law becomes the sole criterion for all, great and small, and recognition of morality increases in the world in direct proportion, not in inverse proportion to power and greatness. Only when the greater and more powerful the person, the less any lapse in the laws of morality is excused. Then and only then will Amalek's reign on earth cease forever. And then he says, he warns us, do not forget this when you yourself will have to suffer from the brutality and violence of Amalek. Remain firm, maintain the humanity and justice that your God has taught you. It is to these virtues that the future belongs. Justice and humanity will ultimately triumph over brutality and violence, and you yourself have been sent to herald and help bring about through your very faith and example that triumph and that future. So Deborah and all of the family, I wish you Langa Yarim, only brachot, only good things, and then we see the Atgoy Tzedek, and then we see the fulfillment of all of the wonderful prophecies that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us.
Thank you, Yohedit, for those beautiful, eye-opening remarks, taking us down history's path. You've been connected to our family for so long, and you are certainly a sister, part of our extended family. And really, thank you so much for being here and being connected and interconnected with our family over the years. Thank you for bringing justice and helping my mother bring justice. Following Yehudit's remarks, I think it now is an opportune time as ever to seize the moment and take a moment to reflect on our brothers and sisters in Eretz HaKodesh, in Eretz Yisrael, and the hostages that are presently in captivity. Just, I'll say a quick psalm, a quick couple of Tehillim, Shir HaMalos, Esa Inai El Harim Me Ayin Yavi Ezri Me Ima Dinoi Oise Shamayim Ba'aretz, Al Yidin Lamavrat Lecha, Yonim Shemrecha, Ine Lo Yonum Lo Yishon Shomer Yisrael, Adonai Shemercha, Adonai Tzilcha Yad Minecha, Gevim Hashemesh Le'yakeka, V'yarech Ba'layla, Yishmercha Mikora, Yishmer Snapshecha, Adonai Yishmer Tzeischa, V'vayecha, Me'ata, V'yadoyla. Please, everyone, enjoy your dinner, and we will continue on the program in a few minutes. Thank you.
Oh. I will
As we conclude this evening of remembrance and reflection, let us all take comfort in the words of Yeshaya, Yeshayahu. This reminds us that life does not end in death, but the neshamas of those righteous individuals remain connected to us. Time will come when we will all be reunited. Ari's legacy lives on in the mitzvahs. He inspired, he continues to inspire the Torah that we did and the learning that we did in his merit, and the unwavering faith that we as people hold on to. May we honor Ari's memory by bringing more light in the world, into this world, just like the Lubavitch Rebbe taught us. And may we soon see the fulfillment of Hashem's promise, a world of redemption, where sorrow is no more, and where those who have lost, we have lost, will rise again and be reunited with us with joy and peace. Yehi zechron bracha, may his memory be a blessing. Ruben, we'd like to ask, please, to lead dessert and to lead bench. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for all for joining us. May we only come together with simchas, Mesiras Taivas. We all be benched as we come in close to Pesach, and Kosher, Phil from Pesach, and B'ezrat Hashem. We should all be united with our loved ones, and here be Aminu with the coming of Mashiach. Amen.
We have a meeting, right? I want.
If you watched, raise your hand. Okay.
I'm signing the bill bench.